And so I think it's time for us to get started on this next section of our exciting day, talking about the subject of diversity and inclusion. So I would like to welcome all of you to this micro session about what does success look like? And our subtopic is building strong cultures. I am Steve Finch, and I will be your moderator for this section. And I am super excited to be here and to share this information with you, along with some guest panelists that we'll introduce in just a moment. But for those of you that may not know, I am the Senior Vice President of Automotive Services at AAA Western and Central New York. And prior to this role, I spent a number, I won't even tell you how many, but it was a whole lot of years at General Motors. And I have been very fortunate to be from this Buffalo area, and I had the chance to serve in many community services and community areas. But the one I'm most proud of that we are talking about here today has to do with being the vice chair of the Racial Equity Roundtable of the Community Foundation of Buffalo. And in that role, I get the opportunity to work with some really tremendous people and get exposed to a lot of ideas around the topics that we are in discussion on today. But we're going to have a panel, and that panel is going to have some discussion around these topics. So I'd like to introduce them to you on this afternoon. First, we have Andrea Berki-Nnuji. She's a self-professed data fanatic. I love that description. And Andrea has more than 10 years of experience in market research and analytics. She and her growing team at Crowley Webb support their media experts to optimize patient enrollment efforts through predictive modeling and linguistic analysis. Andrea also was a key contributor to the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership's Employing Diversity and Inclusion in Western New York document that we're going to talk a little bit more about today. So Andrea, welcome. We also have with us Jan Peters. Jan is a seasoned human resources professional, and she's currently employed with Trocaire College as its chief human resources officer. She has 20 plus years of global human resource leadership experience within organizations in all phases of the business cycle and within multiple industries. She's been in financial services and management and consulting, with manufacturing and IT services, tourism and hospitality, and now she's with higher education. So again, welcome, Jan. Lastly, rounding out our panel of experts is Collin Gehl. He's with Child and Family Services and with Say Yes of Buffalo, where he is currently the Talent Acquisition and Development Manager. In that role, Collin recruits new staff, he conducts orientations and other staff development related training in the agency. In addition, he provides HR support for Say Yes Buffalo, and he also sits on the organization's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So Collin actually will become the first full-time director of human resources at Say Yes Buffalo on July 1st of 2021. So we look forward to hearing his insights on how to recruit diverse candidates, how to build diverse networks, and how to provide support within organization for employees of color. So with all of that, we say welcome to Collin as well. So I'm, like I said, excited to moderate today's discussion and to share thoughts and ideas. There's so much around this topic because creating a culture in the workplace is so critically important to the success of diversity and inclusion initiatives. So we know that strong cultures just don't happen by accident. So I'm looking forward to this discussion to hear more about what the data shows and ways that we can build strong cultures. So let's set the foundation. I'd like to do that by asking Andrea to share some of the highlights from the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership Employing DEI Assessment Report. Andrea played a key role in the process of compiling and analyzing the data, so I think she'd be a great expert to engage on this topic. The purpose of the session is to use the insights that were gained through the assessment to empower our D&I efforts. So just to set the stage, we want to talk ultimately about three important factors. One is to get started, how we're going to get started. Andrea is going to talk to us a little bit about the data there. Then we're going to talk about creating the infrastructure and then setting and measuring goals. So Andrea, I'd like to turn it over to you, and you can give us the impact that a company might see when they begin their focus on diversity and inclusion efforts and what the data shows about that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Let me share a few slides with you. All right. And this is not the first slide I wanted to share, so just give me another second here. Of course, being virtual.
Technical issues.
It's not an issue, Steve. Yes. So now we are here. And it's still backspace. Yes, and I am right there. So first of all, it is an honor to be here today, and I am so excited, and I'm so glad, to share this panel with Jen, Collin, as well as, with you, Steve. But, we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. So I wanted to share a few slides to give you some visual about the assessment. Before I would answer your question, Steve, I just wanted to share this first slide with the audience. So everyone has a clear picture of where companies currently stand. Steve mentioned that we conducted this assessment. We reached out to businesses across Western New York last year. I think it was in April 2020, to better understand how companies currently foster diversity and inclusion in their workplace. We also wanted to have a better understanding of how businesses are approaching D&I processes by also solidifying a benchmark that we can use to compare future assessment findings to see how these processes will be shifted. You can see on this slide that of the total businesses, 72% reported that they have started their D&I journey, and 28% reported that they have not begun their journey yet. Today, we just want to focus on the positive, and we don't worry about the 28%. We are going to focus on the 72% because, as Steve mentioned, we wanted to make sure to give you actionable insights and also to empower you regardless of where you are in your current journey. The next slide is really telling us the story of how companies in Western New York area are approaching their D&I journey and how far along they are. Once you drill down from the 72% of the companies which already began their journey, you can see 45% of these companies reported that everyone at their workplace is committed to enhancing D&I. 21% of these companies reported that they have a point person or people appointed in charge of their D&I processes. And 20% of these companies reported that they have a committee in charge of their D&I processes. Now, when you look at that 17%, it is a little less compared to the 72%. And these are the companies that reported that they have set concrete D&I goals. Now, when we get to the 5%, these are the companies who actually said that they are measuring these concrete goals and they feel that they achieved their D&I goals completely. Now, when we look at this 5%, where ideally all of us want to be, we get a better understanding of how much work there is to be done, as everybody, every company is at a different point with making actionable process towards their goals. Every company, they have their own journey, but as Steve mentioned, the key is getting started. Data from the assessment shows that getting started has an immediate impact on perceptions of the organization's commitment to D&I. If you look at this chart, it shows the significant differences between perceptions among companies that they have begun their journey versus companies who have not begun yet. I don't want to spend too much time reading all these statements here, but let's just look at the top 3 on the left side, because this is really critical. Companies that have already begun their journey are significantly more likely to report that their organization maintains a culture that promotes inclusion, promotes equity, and promotes diversity. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and giving it back to Steve.
Thanks so much, Andrea. You know, the real issue is you can't get to the destination if you don't start, right? And so organizations are working through how to get started in order to achieve the culture and get to the spot that they'd like to be. So I'd like to ask each of our panelists, in your experience and with your organizations, how did you get started? How did you get started with the D&I process? So Jan, I'll start with you and maybe ask if you would share with the audience your journey in that regard.
Well, thank you, Steve. At Trocaire College, our initial focus was on ensuring our strategic plan included the DEI language, specifically to aspiring to select qualified candidates who more closely reflect the diversity of our students. We have a very diverse student population. And once we had this among our top organizational goals, we obtained the support from our board of trustees and the president on down. Having support of key leadership is, in my mind, absolutely integral to success. So then we first ensured we had diverse candidate pools in support of our recruitment efforts. We spent time on reviewing job descriptions and advertisements to ensure that the language is welcoming to all applicants to promote inclusion. We ensured our interview questionnaires included questions directed toward a candidate's overall experience with an eagerness to learn the differences among others and focus on how to be inclusive. We trained our search committees to embrace different perspectives and not merely seek out individuals just like ourselves. Mm-hmm. As far as impact, I think it's noteworthy to mention that through these efforts, we were able to more than double the percentage of our diverse faculty and staff hires. And we continue to measure our progress and report to our board of trustees using our strategic planning dashboard report, comparing our diversity with other local higher education institutions, as well as with the demographic data for the Western New York population.
That's awesome, Jan. So thank you for that insight. And you know, one thing I do want to also make sure everyone knows is that the data that we are looking at is Western New York data. So it's about companies and organizations, you know, that are right here in our area. So I wanted to make sure that we have that as a backdrop. But also, I'm interested in Collin. And you know, can you share with us, you know, your journey and how do you get started?
Sure. Thank you so much, Steve. So with Child and Family Services, they had started this journey actually prior to me starting. I was the first management fellow at Child and Family Services, which was a program that's set up that's traditionally done in the for-profit industry, but our previous CEO, Dr. Francisco Vasquez, had come up with this idea of sort of doing a fellowship program at Child and Family Services, specifically to increase diversity among managers within the organization. So I was one of the first fellows, and I came in, and the fellowship worked like it would work at any organization. You'd work in a specific department or a program at Child and Family Services for a period of time, usually anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks. There'd be projects that you would have to do, and then you would move on. And the idea was it was a full-time paid position. At the end of the year, if there was opportunities available, you'd potentially be offered an opportunity. I went into HR as my second rotation here at Child and Family Services. I made an impact with our then HR director, who we really hit it off. Her name was Amy Cortesi, who, you know, I always say is who really sort of got me into the HR and is part of my HR journey. And I was able to make an impact, and probably about 3 months later, there was an opportunity available, and I was offered the position, and I accepted. And so with one of the things that was important to the organization was increasing ethnic diversity within the organization. We are a social services program, so we are very female heavy. but we're very white female heavy. So the idea was, okay, we need to increase our diversity because our clients are not all white females. And so our clients need to be interacting with people that look like them. And so that was the key. And so that was what we at Child and Family Services started doing. And so officially, Child and Family Services really embraced DEI as a concept when last year Child and Family Services hired its first Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, who actually is going to be on the panel at 4 o'clock today. Her name's Chantel Thompson, just to sort of promote that. But also in terms of my work at Say Yes, I don't want to neglect Say Yes. So I'm supporting the two organizations right now. Say Yes Buffalo has always had racial equity as part of their backdrop, and so they've always been very committed to racial equity. But as an organization, within the last year and a half, we've developed a racial equity committee at Say Yes that specifically is working on organizational training. Also, the staff developed a racial equity statement in 2019, and the racial equity statement is now existing on all of the Say Yes Buffalo job descriptions. And it is something that is asked in every single interview, no matter what you are applying for. So that's just sort of the beginnings of our journey, and I don't want to talk much longer, so I'm going to pass it back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Collin. I appreciate that. So I'm hearing there's a lot of things relative to getting started. There's, you can go everywhere from strategic planning to, best practices, learning what other organizations are doing, creating specific positions and things like that. I'll tell you, I also had an experience when I came back to Buffalo 13 years ago at the Tonawanda engine plant. You kind of get dumped sometimes into situations where the environment exists, right? And it was such a large organization that there was already a lot of diversity there. And so sometimes you just have to kind of like figure out how to make, an organization function effectively in an environment that already has a lot of diversity. So sometimes, it's there and you have to, learn how to manage and accept it and build it. But in other places, other organizations, it may take a little bit more work. So my next question for the panel is, how do you maybe take advantage of some low-hanging fruit? Are there things that you can just go out there and maybe grab a hold of that represent an opportunity that may be easier to attain than some other things? And Andrea, I'll start with you. Any low-hanging fruit examples or thoughts that you might have along those lines?
Yes. So our agency is a little bit different, from Jen's and Collin's. And for us, the low-hanging fruit was 3 years ago when we actually recognized that, Collin, you mentioned, about the white females. We looked at our company profile pictures and we were like, wow, we are really white. And we have been supporting Buffalo Prep for over, decades. We have very diverse client base, but we still didn't have the diverse workforce. So when it comes to a small company, and I remember 3 years ago, I attended this same symposium, and after the symposium, I was like, okay, so now what? Where do we start? And sometimes the company don't have the resources, or maybe they are not there yet to invest, into making the workforce more diverse. However, I think step one is recognizing, that, you have to change. And also when it comes to the low-hanging fruit is that you don't have to make, investment. You don't have to have the resources immediately. What we did as a start, we created a committee. We already had the people. We created a committee. We invited everybody from the company voluntarily. If you would like to participate, we made sure that we included everyone. And then 1/3 of the company actually volunteered and they wanted to be part of this, D&I committee. And this was what we started 3 years ago. And we, based on the volume of the employees who wanted to participate, they actually had to create subcommittees. And after the first few meetings, we prioritized, where we want to be, and we empowered, employees, because that's so important that they might not be able to create the diverse workforce, but once we hiring managers create a more diverse workforce, our employees will be able to foster a more inclusive workplace, because it's just as important as creating a diverse. It's diversity and inclusion. Yeah. So I will give it back to you, Steve. I know I can just go on and on, but I think our journey is a little bit different, but really it's what's really important is that you have to recognize that there's a journey and you have to get, started somewhere.
A lot of organizations have some diversity. It might not be at the level that you would like it to be, but, taking advantage of what you have is really important. So, Jan, any thoughts about low-hanging fruit?
Sure, and not unlike what Andrea said, at Trocaire College, we realized it's all well and good to increase the diversity of our employees, but we know we also must ensure that we're providing an inclusive culture and environment conducive to retaining that value of a more diverse employee base. So the first thing I did was to reach out to Nancy McNamara of Buffalo Niagara Partnerships and ask her for some ideas and assistance is how do we get started there? And one of my colleagues is the Trocaire Chief Student Affairs Officer. She was doing some interesting programming in her division with our students, and her team developed a cultural competency certificate, which was also offered not just to students, but faculty and staff as well. So I reached out to her and suggested we both partner on our DEI efforts at Trocaire together and learn as much as we can about DEI. So with Nancy McNamara's encouragement, we both participated in the Buffalo Niagara Partnership Diversity and Inclusion Academy, which included the Racial Equity Impact Analysis training. We found that the training provides a really good foundation from which we're now better prepared to launch our campus community efforts. So partnering, with the student side of our business is, creates a more holistic approach.
And I think those comments are so important. We don't have to go on this journey all alone. There's been so much work and there's so much opportunity to partner with others that are either on the same journey or maybe slightly ahead of us, that we can leverage those things that they've done. So great input. Collin, anything from your perspective?
Sure. I will just say that a lot of what has already been said by Andrea and Jan is stuff that we have done with Child and Family Services and Say Yes, different versions of those. The other thing that I would always say is doing an employee engagement survey. You don't even have to call it a DEI survey, because if you haven't committed yet to DEI, but you could ask specific questions that are related to employee engagement, and which can have sort of a DEI focus, and I think that is really important as well, because it really will help you understand sort of what people are feeling in terms of their day-to-day work environment. And I mean, I know I have more specifics that I could go into later, or you could contact me, and I can give you those. But I do think that that really can help, especially if that's that low-hanging stuff. And I always say this about low-hanging fruit or things in general: if you're doing nothing, and even if you do like now 2%, you're doing better than what you were doing before. So I always want people to sort of keep that in mind. Not to say that you only need to do 2%, but I think that any part of this journey is something that you need to celebrate, because it is a journey, and I always want to keep that in mind for people.
That's awesome. And Collin, it's so true that the survey is really, just as Andrea was telling us, it's more data. It gives you the information that you can then work upon to say, what can I do? And I think all of you mentioned this whole idea around inclusion. Inclusion is so big a part of what we do. Yes, we want diversity, but you also want to make sure that the people that you do bring into your organization feel as though they're part of the team, the inclusion part. So all of those are things that can be done, without a big budget, without a lot of effort. These are things that organizations can immediately get started and get the benefit from, which is really important. So we talked about data. That's kind of like number one. So the second factor for creating an important culture in our environments has to do with infrastructure. And what I mean by that is employers that have a committee, or maybe they have a person, a designated person in charge of diversity, equity, and inclusion are far more likely to set and achieve their goals. So Andrea, can you show us the numbers around that and tell us a little bit more about that insight?
Sure. Let me just get to my infrastructure slide here. And, put it in a slideshow so you can all see. Yeah, so Steve, you already gave the definition, but I just wanted to say it again, that when we, I often get the question that what do you mean by D&I infrastructure? So here we mean that companies have either have a point person or people in charge, or they have a committee that is accountable for overseeing the D&I process and making sure that progress is being made towards their initiatives. When it comes to data, having established a D&I infrastructure seems to be a key component to successful goal completion. For example, we found that companies that have formed a D&I infrastructure are significantly more likely to have made actionable progress towards their journey compared to those who did not. They are more likely to set concrete goals. They are more likely to have policies in place, such as recruitment efforts include outreach to attract minority candidates, such as hiring managers follow specific D&I guidelines, as well as job descriptions that are run through a bias detector. So we take these findings as evidence for the importance of an infrastructure in reaching your D&I goals.
Excellent. So what kind of infrastructure have you set up in your organization, and how does it function? Andrea?
Yes, so as I mentioned, we started, setting up a D&I committee. Okay. And based on the D&I committee, based on actually the interest, we have subcommittees. We have people who are in charge for education and training. We have another subcommittee, and they are focusing on how to create a more diverse workforce and how can we be more inclusive. We also have a subcommittee. I made notes because we have so many, but the most important, we have a subcommittee that is in charge of celebrating our current diversity. And we also have a subcommittee that is focusing on how to improve internal communication. So we started that 3 years ago, and recently now we are a little over 100 employees. So we actually have now Katie, our own HR director, which we are really super excited about because we have our HR person in-house, and she is also following now the processes to make sure that we are focusing intentionally to hire a more diverse workforce, which can be, a more diverse when it comes to ethnicity. It can also be, focusing more on gender and as well as age.
Excellent. Thank you. No, that's great insight. Collin, do you have any insight on this particular issue?
So yeah, I guess that when it comes to sort of infrastructure, one of the things that we did with Child and Family specifically was, hiring that chief diversity officer that I talked about from before, and really sort of making this a goal of the organization. And her immediate impact was just felt. She's been here since September, And I mean, the conversations that are being had at Child and Family Services are things that I never would have guessed. To be honest with you, I wouldn't have guessed that this was stuff that I actually would see in my lifetime that would be happening in workplaces across the spectrum. Also with Say Yes Buffalo, I talked about our REI committee, but we're developing trainings for the whole organization in many different sort of topics, such as talking about race in the workplace, how racism can impact your health. And then also Say Yes has also been doing a lot of restorative justice circles, specifically, when there's been an issue like, there's been major issues specifically regarding police violence of this past year. When the Chauvin verdict came through, we actually had a restorative justice circle just to help everybody process. And even we as a racial equity committee of Say Yes also we are developing responses to when there's different sort of social injustices, specifically regarding police related shootings, because so many of us, specifically those who are Black and brown men, and can feel can understand sort of the issues of being having interactions with law enforcement that can be negative, and sometimes they can be fatal. So that is something that we've done in terms of developing sort of our infrastructure regarding this.
Excellent. I'm not a great multitasker, but I've been trying to keep a little bit of an eye on some of the comments that are coming in as well. I know we've got a lot of content, but there's at least a little bit of insight that our audience is giving us about the usage of surveys versus some of the things that we've talked about with focus groups and others. Jan, do you have any insight maybe about that, or a comment that you would like to share with the group?
Sure. So when it comes to measuring and surveying and so forth, we have a inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility committee called IDEA. And they set annual goals based on data provided by various tools measuring employee perceptions. For example, we've engaged with the Chronicle of Higher Education, Great Places to Work program, which produces data specific to best-in-class workplace activities, and it's heavily weighted on DEI efforts. So we get these reports, and then we can, fashion some of our efforts toward improvement. We also use a tool called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Maturity Index. This tool can be downloaded from the Colleges and Universities Professional Association, Human Resources, for short, it's Coupa HR, from their website. It measures 5 areas. 1 is communication and education. 2 is assessment. 3 is culture. 4, I skipped 1. 4 is investment and infrastructure, and 5, compensation, recruitment, and retention. So the IDEA committee, as a group, we answered the questions together, because then it provides a very detailed report with specific recommendations for improvements within each area. It's a great way to benchmark your DEI efforts and build a DEI plan, setting goals for improvement, and then you can check your year-to-year, progress on it. We scored highest under compensation, recruitment, and retention, but we all know that's just the tip of the iceberg. And do you want to know the best part about this tool, Steve?
Yeah, what's that?
It's free. You don't even have to be a member of Coupa HR to access it. So, I'm finding in this journey that there's a lot of expertise and resources out there that you don't even have to pay for. So if you just Google DEI Maturity Index Coupa HR, it'll take you there, and you don't have to be a member.
What? Say it one more time, Jan. Is Coupa
Yes, CUPA HR, and it's called the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Maturity Index. So it measures, how far along you're going with, what sort of improvement that you can make. It really gives you a detailed report.
Awesome. That's awesome. It's great to learn about tools like that we can have access to. And Collin, I think that you also have knowledge of a tool that you've used to gather data from an associate's perspective. Do you want to share that with the group as well?
Sure. So SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resources Management. So I'm actually I'll put it in the chat so everybody can see it. So that is, SHRM actually has a DEI survey or assessment tool. I could not share it because technically it's SHRM's, so I have to take but it is there, and you can Google that as well. So if there's any HR professionals on the line who are SHRM members, I believe you have right access to it. If you're not a member, I don't know if you're able to access it or not. But I would also encourage people to just Google sort of these types of tools, because there's so many that are available. And I think that, but the SHRM one specifically just really was a great tool, because it just sort of asked sort of those basic questions sort of to get you started. And it really was more of an opportunity to sort of like get you inspired on different subject matters. So you could always ask them in your own way, because I'm always all about sort of being, what I call inspired by. So, I'm inspired by something and I'm able to sort of put it into my own language. And so I think also, because every organization has their own language and own way of asking things. So I think it's just a great tool and a great thing to utilize.
Excellent, excellent. So thanks for sharing that with us. I'd like to switch or change subjects a little bit. Dottie mentioned something that came out in the data, Andrea, that I was wondering if you could share a little insight on, and that is that sometimes there's a difference in perspective between what the senior leadership sees in terms of diversity, effectiveness versus what might be seen on the front line. Can you talk a little bit about that disconnect between the CEOs and associates?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I am reading, the chats here too. And I see from Hillary, she actually said that focus groups work, really well for MNT, because if you want to know how your associates feel, you need to, get engaged and you need to talk to them. So this is actually a great, segue to the slide I would like to share with you. And it's right here. Let me just go to my slideshow. I'm doing good with this slide sharing. You guys can give it to me. So right, so good. So yes, so as Steve said, this was very interesting. So this is interesting when you look at the differences between executive level and staff level respondents. So CEO level respondents are generally more optimistic than staff level about their company's commitment to D&I, such that they are more likely to report that everyone in the workplace is committed to D&I. CEO respondents also have significantly more optimistic perceptions of their organization's current performance compared to staff, and were significantly less likely to report certain challenges facing workplace D&I progress compared to staff. So this is really interesting, because you might ask, like, how is this possible that I work for the same organization and my CEO, and our perception is totally different? And these are significant differences. This is not just, a few percent. These are significant. So this can be, first of all, this gap needs to be measured. You need to, like Collin gave some, tools, and there are some tools available that if you feel that this gap exists, at your current organization, make sure you measure it, because mainly what we do believe it's based on communication. If you think about companies that we have, larger organizations where a CEO might not be as involved in the everyday, work life, that they might not experience the same, challenges that somebody at staff level would experience. However, there might be a communication issue when executive levels already initiated some processes, but they have not communicated, those with the staff level yet. So this is just, I will stop sharing this screen now, but this is just very important and very critical when you look at your own organization to find out if there's a difference or if you have this, gap between, CEO or executive level versus staff level perception.
Yeah, it's so important. And those focus groups and communication organizations. I know in our AAA, we just started a focus group called Beacon. And again, it's to be able to get that information and stay connected with what's going on right from the frontline employees all the way through the organization, so everyone can make sure that they communicate and stay connected. So we're getting to the conclusion of our time together, and just to re-emphasize the importance of developing a culture around getting started, number one, first of all, creating the infrastructure, and then setting and measuring goals through communicating and being aware of our employees. I just wanted to leave it with, in these last couple of minutes, maybe going around to each of you and say, do you have any advice? Maybe advice that had been given to you along the journey, or advice that you would share with our audience about next steps on their journey. So how about I'll start with Andrea.
Yes, okay, I'm not muted. At the same time, I'm sorry, Steve, I was just putting the link in the chat. That
well, I can move over to Jan maybe, and then I'll come back to you, I promise.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I think it's something you can't do yourself. You need your ambassadors. You need, people that are just as excited about it as you, because it's not something one and done. It's a constant, process. So finding DEI champions and ambassadors is really important, I think, and helping people feel what's in it for them and giving them those safe space opportunities to express themselves about things I've heard the other panel members mention, where, they can talk and express, their frustrations or their concerns about social justice and just, everything in general. Giving them safe spaces, I think, is really key. Make it about them, listen to their point of view.
So Jan, I'd summarize it and say, share the load. Don't feel like you got to bear this entire burden on yourself, but work together with others that also feel passionate like you do. So thank you, Collin.
Really, I just go back to what I talked about before. Just the DEI is a journey. I do agree with making sure that you can have those ambassadors. I think if you know anyone on your management level who you can talk to just about this initiative, I think it's good to have that. I also encourage organizations, so anybody on the call who's an executive level, just really think about who it is that you're hiring, who you're bringing into the organization. The more ethnic diversity, specifically Black and Brown people, that you have in your organization, the more these issues will come up, because these are the people who are being affected by this every single day. So it is so important and it is key. But again, diversity, equity, and inclusion as a whole is a journey. Start the journey now and think about how far you'll be a year from now. Whereas if you're sort of waiting, trying to figure out should I, you will be paralyzed with indecision. Awesome.
Thank you so much for that. So start the journey and enjoy the journey as you go, because it will be an opportunity to work those things out along the way. So thank you. Andrea.
Yeah, so for me, I think the key is to empower your people, because it's really, really worked for our company. And when you empower your people, be creative. I just want to take 30 seconds of one of the initiative I am so proud of that came from our diversity and inclusion committee. We committed that every quarter we are going to invest $15,000 in our resources and help a minority-owned business investor in New York. We are already at the second business, and we successfully, we call this program Chroma. And after the first one, we selected a minority-owned business in the East Side, Carrick's Coffee. And just what we learned from how much it meant, that particular business, that instead of writing a check, helping, that way, we were able to sit down with them, help them plan, do some analytics, create the website. So I think we just have to all be creative. And once you empower your people, you will get so many ideas, and then you just have to go and do it.
That's awesome. So thank you for those words of wisdom and encouragement to share the load, enjoy the journey, empower your people. And I'll just add to that, be sincere about your efforts, and that culture will for sure begin to evolve into something that you would like it to see from a diverse standpoint. So I thank you to my panelists. You all did an awesome job, and thanks to all of you that have joined us. And we're going to now take a 15-minute break, and we'll see you back in the main room at 4 o'clock. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.